and welcome back to the This is Winter Sport series, sponsored by Protect Our Winters UK and brought to you by the Passion Stories podcast. I'm your host, Emma Cole, and I'm just so excited to bring you the first episode of 2026, which is a Winter Olympics and Paralympics year. I know. So exciting. And, it's just mega, the wonderful guests that I've got lined up ahead of those brilliant competitions to get all the insight, and it's just going to be epic. And just before we bring in this week's guest, I thought I'd share, in the spirit of New Year's and 2026, I thought I'd share my word of 2026. So similar to a New Year's resolution, but a little bit different, I guess, is I've decided just one word is what I need, which I want to channel throughout this year across all sorts. And the word is balance. Cool, I know, right? So balance in terms of mental, physical, emotional, professional, personal, work, sport, more, anything. You can apply it anywhere you want. And I just think for me, that is the word. That's going to be my word of 2026. And I'm going to just, not obviously make it my be all and end all, but just have it in the back of my mind. I'm going to put it on a post-it note. And I'm going to reflect and I'm going to see that word and I'm going to think, balance. Did I go to yoga, for example? Not sure that I will have done any yoga, but I like the idea of, having that balance. So for me, that's just a really, really important word. And I would love to know if you have got a word for 2026 that you'll be channeling. So let me know. So now let's bring on this week's guest, because I'm so excited to be joined by Matt Smith. Matt is a cross-country skier from South Africa who qualified for the Winter Olympics after taking up the sport 3 years ago. And in fact, he actually qualified for the Winter Olympics 2 years after taking it up. I know, so epic. And he's going to tell us all about how he managed to do that. I mean, it is a wicked story, and he shares so much from the importance of community and how he's found that coming from that sort of non-snow sport nation to his, first time learning cross-country skiing, to his hopes and dreams for after, and what the whole experience has taught him. So without further ado, let's welcome to the podcast, Matt Smith. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the Passion Stories podcast. It is wonderful to have you on, especially as we've just kicked off this Winter Olympics year.
We have. Is this the first pod of the year you're recording?
This is it. This is the Kickstarter for the Winter Olympics and Paralympics build-up.
Exactly, and kudos for you saying Paralympics as well. People forget sometimes. 1 month after that, so we're right. Today is 1 month away from me actually going. I leave on the 5th of February, and we're recording this on the 5th of Jan. And Paralympics starts exactly a month after that, on this the 6th of March, I believe.
So epic. And Matt, your story in particular is pretty special, which we're going to dig into. I just want to understand a little bit, what inspired this Olympic dream? I
think the Olympics inspires Olympic dreams. The Olympics is, in my honest opinion, it's like the PhD in sport. It's the highest degree you can get. And if you think about, to kind of get round answering your question, what inspires Olympic dreams? I think you can't be what you can't see. And watching the Olympics as a child, if you think about most events, big sporting events, right? The Olympics are the pinnacle, right? So most of us have some memory of watching an Olympic Games, be it summer or winter, from our childhood, right? From our parents watching it, or just being exposed to it, or being around it, or having the privilege of having it in the environment you're in. I was in London in 2012 when that happened, right? I remember being in Athens it was 2000 or 2004, I forget, but one of those years I was in Athens when that was going on. We actually didn't watch anything, but it was on every TV. It was. So I just remember growing up around this. Now, marrying that with being a sporty kid and coming from a South African household, which is very sport driven. All of this drives you to want to represent your country. And then, of course, what is the biggest, best stage to represent your country? The Olympics. So that's been, the inspiration has been there before I can remember it not being there, to be honest with you.
And so then, how did the snow sport aspect come into it?
Yeah, I wished I picked a summer sport, let's be honest. No, but the truth is, I picked a summer sport, right? That was rugby. Now, so I might not sound it, but I am actually South African, and I born and raised from Johannesburg, family's from Cape Town. I just grew up in the UK from a young age, hence why the British accent is prevalent. But anytime I need to turn it on air, I can turn the South African accent on, just in case, just to prove. But, I grew up in a South African household, which is very rugby dominant. You know, the Springboks are the be all and end all, right? And I grew up wanting to be a Springbok. I grew up wanting to be a Protea, you know, cricketer, or a Bafana, which is our football team as well. And I grew up around obviously dominant summer sports, which is what our nation is famed for. And the reality is, unless you start in a sport at the age of 2 to 12, and you have the right environment, you know, lightning strikes, the magic happens, you know, the dominoes fall in your way, you're not going to become a professional athlete and make a life from it and go to the Olympics, right? So, you know, I continued to pursue other things in my life, right? I went to university, I started working in venture capital and in the tech world, and all while having this kind of diminishing and lost dream of representing my country. Because obviously, you know, now I'm in my 20s and now I'm in my 30s and I haven't yet made any moves in any sport at that level. So that was just a dream that had, to be honest, died like most people until I moved to Oslo, Norway from Cape Town. I was living in Cape Town at the time, and I stumbled upon winter. Now, as you'd imagine, coming from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, this time of year, meaning winter, is tough to get through, right? And as someone who's athletic and likes all sports, plays all sports, master of none, but can dabble in everything from golf to tennis to cricket, whatever. I was now stumped. Like, well, those are all summer sports. What do you do? I can run in the gym, but it gets a bit boring to run more than 2 hours in the gym, right? Or even more than half an hour some of the time, right? I lent into winter and realized, what do the Norwegians do? The Norwegians go cross-country skiing, because I'm in Oslo now, right? So I decided I better learn to cross-country ski. Now, by the way, there's no ambitions of becoming an Olympian at this point. There's no national pride or ambitions to represent my nation at this point. But this is where things change. And this is a good example of, you know, again, you can't be what you can't see. So I have a mutual friend who says, hey, you got to have a ski lesson. I know someone who's a professional skier and they're actually foreign too, and they can give you a lesson. So I get a lesson from, guess what nation this guy's from? Have a guess. The classic cross-country skiing dominant nation.
Norway, Finland.
He's Mexican. Yeah. So I get a lesson with this guy who's also foreign in Norway and is Mexican, and he's now representing Mexico. So he gives me my first lesson. Obviously, at this point, no ambition to do anything in the sport other than just learn it. And I think to myself, hold on, if he's representing Mexico, maybe I could represent South Africa, you know? And I started to Google search, like it was pre-ChatGPT, you know, and I'm Google searching, you know, does anyone represent South Africa in cross-country skiing? No, not currently. Has anyone before? Yes, there's been one guy before, Oliver Kras, African-German guy. He went to 2006 and 2010 Olympics. Okay, but there's no one active right now. Okay, how do you become an active athlete for your nation? How do you know, who do I speak to? What do I do? How good do I need to become? All of this kind of stuff. And then, hold on a minute. When's the next Olympics? Now, this is the beginning of 2023. So I'm like, okay, I have 3 years. When in fact you don't. You actually have 2 because you qualify a year before. I learned that as I lost a year in the process. So I realized I've got 2 years to get good enough to qualify for the Olympics for South Africa. In the process, I have to qualify for the World Championships. I have to be good enough for that. I have to be good enough to represent my country, you know, to reverse engineer the whole thing. I'll pause the story there, but that's where the real story and the ambition, and back to your first question about the Olympic dream, that's when that was born, at the beginning of 2023, with the dream to represent my country and fulfill a childhood dream of just becoming not the Springbok, but the Snowbok, as I'm called.
Ah, we love it. And I mean, take us back to that ski lesson with this Mexican skier. I mean, was that your first time on snow, or were you familiar with skiing before?
I wasn't familiar with, you know, it was not my first time on snow, but I definitely can't say I'm familiar with snow or skiing. You know, having grown up in the UK, I'd been on like a couple ski trips as a kid, you know, as a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, whatever. But they kind of stopped then, really. And, you know, we went to some place in Europe for a week, and I had a lesson, and then by the end of it, I was, you know, falling less on my bum, but that was mostly snowboarding. So no, and then there was a decade plus that had passed between that where I hadn't been on skis. So there definitely wasn't any ski feeling or any sort of legacy in the sport. Tried it a couple of times, sure. And yeah, you know, I think I tried cross-country skiing, but that was the first time I really had a lesson. I tried it, I think, 5 times before, and that was having lived in Norway, going out with friends on a cabin trip to their mountain, you know, cabins, and then someone giving me some skis and saying, hey, like, just not to leave you in the cabin, come join us. And, you know, that was obviously just very slow and painful, just falling over the whole time. So that first lesson was wonderful, because the first lesson was a lesson in the power of community, because, you know, Alan took me out. Funnily enough, right now, I can almost see where he took me out for the first time, because now I live right where where you should live to ski in Oslo. And Alan took me out, and he invited a guy called Victor, who's also Mexican, out. So we had these 3 Nordic people doing Nordic skiing. And, he gave me some equipment. We did a fun route and I enjoyed the process and saw the two of them who had both been representing Mexico in the International Ski Federation in FIS. And I just had two examples of what to do and how to do it. Obviously, it wasn't quite as easy as that, but that first lesson was just it was a positive first lesson. And I think there's a power in having a good positive experience, That was not a deterrent. If anything, it was an encouragement.
Yeah.
Versus most of us going skiing for the first time, bumping and falling, crashing. God, you really have to be strong-willed to push through that. But I had a really positive experience, predominantly because of the community that I was exposed to then.
And that kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is you can't be what you can't see. And there you were, seeing these two people.
Two examples.
Yeah, so cool. And can you describe cross-country skiing for someone who's never done it before?
Yeah, I get asked this all the time, and I can't keep giving different answers. I'm trying different things because it's really hard to describe. I'll have a go, right? But I'll tell you one thing I love about it is, I'm closing my eyes right now, by the way. I'm kind of feeling it because you're flying. It honestly feels like you're flying. Because if more people will have tried alpine or downhill skiing than cross country, let's be honest, right? So it's like the fun part of downhill where you're flying and gliding without the really scary parts of black runs where they're sort of, 45 degrees down or something ridiculous. You don't have that kind of scary side of it or that speed, but you still get up to speed. And it's called cross-country skiing, so you go across the country. So I jokingly call it skiing uphill because you both ski downhill and in the flat parts and then, of course, uphills, right? But it just means you see a different type of outdoor scenery than you do on an alpine ski track, which alpine track is almost like a couple of football fields, rugby pitches going down a mountain in a gully surrounded by trees, which is also beautiful, right? You go higher as well. Whereas cross country skiing, you're going through valleys. You don't have to have elevation, so it's a really beautiful sport. Do you know why? Because you can do it your whole life. You can do it as soon as you can stand. So let's say you can do it from 1 to 101 because
it's cool.
It is, right? Because when you go alpine skiing, it's not like, them versus us or anything like that. But to divide the audience for a second, alpine skiing, it's, of course, there's different types of runs, but cross-country skiing, you can go as easy or as hard as you want. You can do as tough or as light terrain as you want. You can be 101 grandmother or grandfather and go out on flat terrain, do a couple of circles of a stadium, not break a sweat, but be out in nature and enjoying the winter. Or you can go out like we do and, be a Jesse Diggins or, any one of them who are just absolutely unbelievable athletic machines, paddling up hills faster than anyone else can run downhill. It's phenomenal. So it's really just got this complete whatever you want from the sport, it'll give you at any point you want it. It's, and then there's different places you can go. It's just you glide, you fly. Yeah, and it tests every element of your body, and there's a mental side of it as well because you're not just standing on two legs. You're predominantly on one leg, balancing for the when you're shifting your weight. Meaning your mind is engaged and you're moving, and there's a coordination which requires intellect. So it's just you get a mental workout as well. And I'll finish it there, but it's a really really cool sport that definitely doesn't get enough praise for how unique it is. In my honest opinion, everyone just, you've seen all the jokes about it's the most boring sport or it's antidepressants to try it, all that kind of stuff, right? But it's really not. It's really not. It's super fun.
From my perspective, I think it looks like just so beautiful, and that whole gliding and through the nature, it's just unreal. So this 3-year period, or even 2 years, shall we say, to qualify for the Olympics, what has been the key to your success?
So it's 2 years, not 3, right? So when I began this journey, I went about it systematically, meaning it was the beginning of 2023. I realized I had 3 years. Nope, lost 1, 2 years to make it. So we had a target and a race that I had to qualify in, right? We had to qualify in the World Championships in Trondheim, which was in Norway, 2 years later in February the 26th. I'll never forget the date of last year, 25. And there was a 7.5 kilometers classic race that I had to get a certain time in, effectively, and under, right? So we knew what we needed to work towards. We had a very clear, defined goal. Now, the way I approached this was something I call the key minutes and the key moments. So that 2 years until the race that I had to qualify in, one shot, one opportunity, very 8 mile.
Yeah.
We knew I needed to get a certain time, which is a certain speed in the race, right? So being a complete beginner, which is also a blessing because you can just focus on the specific areas you need to focus on. You know how fast I had to become in that distance and how good I had to become in that discipline. So those 2 years were roughly 700 days, all right? Roughly 700 days. So how do I make 700 days matter? Well, there are key minutes and key moments that matter. Now, the key minutes are the 1,000 hours or the 10,000 hours you've heard from all those, books and podcasts around how to become an expert at anything. So I didn't have 10,000 hours. So what we had to do was there's no cheat code, Emma, right? There's no cheat code. You can't just go, all right, I'm just going to jump this phase, jump that phase. You still have to, I had to make up 25 years or 20 years of missed skiing and ski feeling. And ski feeling that doesn't come from training and practice, but comes from just being on snow. And someone's talking to you and you look to your left and now you're not looking forward and you're comfortable with that. I didn't have that ski feeling, right? So I had to spend time on snow. That was the key minutes. And you can't cheat those. Not necessarily just focusing on training and targets and heart rates and intervals or whatever, but actually just focusing on being on snow so that I gained that ski feeling, right? Which is natural to some of these pros who you see almost fall over. They ski backwards for a second, they flip themselves around, and they've never lost balance. Versus someone who stands on skis the first time does that standing. You're right, just falls over backwards, rolls in a ball. You're laughing because you know. So 700 days, key minutes, one thing. Now, this is where the big difference is. I then identified the key moments. Now, in any learning journey, you can identify leapfrog moments where you jump several levels. And usually it's where something clicks. Oh my God, it just clicked, and that can come in anything that you learn, right? It all of a sudden makes sense. And that you can't plan when those happen because they just happen, but you can set the environment up for them to happen, meaning spending the minutes and having very specific targeted things you needed to train on. So for me, for example, we realized to get the times in the races that I needed to get, I needed to be fast in corners. I needed to be strong in the uphills. I needed to, not just be an all-round great skier, but I needed to focus on a few specific things which would have a marginally better impact on my time than just becoming better at skiing on the flats in having good technique. I needed to focus on fast cornering, fast downhills, because that's free speed. That's gravity working for you, not against you. Uphill is working against you. Then it's your cardiovascular system fighting against gravity, right? That thing takes time to train. But the thing that I focused on was, all right, whilst I'm doing everything else, let's focus on the first big leapfrog moment. How can I gain speed in corners by being brave enough to take these big, scary corners at speed? Trust me, I've got the bruises, the scratches for my life to prove that I threw myself into those corners. When I started to crack some of those, they were leapfrog moments. I jumped several levels there in time and everything.
And do you think that your career before cross-country skiing has really helped you to create the right environment? Because the way you're talking about it reminds me how someone might start a business or, get their business to grow. Has that
100%.
Also been quite pivotal?
Listen, sports and business are very, very similar in many ways, right? And you need business and sports, but you kind of also need sports and business. You need to act like an athlete in the business context, but you also need to be a business person in the sports context to set yourself up for success. So, I've signed a book deal, which will come out next year, right? And in the process to that, yeah, thank you. And in the process to that, like kind of the initiation for the book, I did an exercise where I reached out to my closest friends and families, and I said, hey, do you remember any points in my journey where you thought to yourself, this is something he is or isn't doing that is contributing to his success, right? And my one friend said this to me, Rufus, shout out to you, bro. I've forgotten this happened, by the way. So it was, the time of year I started, January, February 2023, and I'm on a plane with him flying somewhere for some work thing, business thing. And I said, hey, by the way, did I tell you about my potential new project I'm going for? I pulled out a 3-year plan, financial plan, for how much it's going to cost me, so like a line by line business model. Basically, I created a business plan. It was wildly off. No, well, it wasn't too bad, actually, to be honest. So I think what I did was, regardless of whether the plan came to fruition or not, the fact that I started to think forward and plan backwards. And then one thing I really did, which I think I advocate for a lot, is try to build a personal brand whilst doing this whole process, right? But I'm becoming one of the most followed cross-country skiers, not because I just talked about my journey the whole time, but I spoke about others and myself. Yes, it's about me and my story, but then I said, hey, listen, the more I sing about others, the more others sing about me. So that's when I realized, hold on, I'm a small nation athlete that we're called small nations, by the way, which is kind of ironic because we're not really big. We're very big nations, but the small nations are like the Saudi Arabias, South Africas, the Mexicos, right, in FIS. So I started to talk about us and promote other athletes and myself in the process and the sport. And that's when things really started to take off for me. So that I approached it like I would have approached a startup, which I'd done beforehand. You know, regardless of what happens, I'm going to leave the sport in a better place than I found it.
Can you just take us a little bit back and to that moment where all of this hard work came to fruition when you qualified in Trondheim with those fast scores?
It was a funny one because it almost, 700 days to get there, right? And I learned many lessons along the way. So I'd hired my own wax man, I'd hired my own car, I'd hired my own accommodation. I didn't take the free accommodation given because then guess what? Everyone got free accommodation and they were like 45 minutes away or an hour away or 30. Yeah. So I'd set everything up for success. So I get there on the day and I start the race and I'm really having a good day. My training had gone super well in the run up to it. My family's there. My pregnant fiance's there. Everyone's watching on TV. And then in the first kilometer and a half, I break a pole, which usually is, and it's a short race, it's 7.5 kilometers. It's a 20-minute race, 24 minutes, I think I got. Every second really counts because, you need to be as close to the winner as possible. I was doing really well in the first 1.5 kilometers, like the first 5 minutes of the race. And then all of a sudden, I crash and I break the pole. Try to recover, and I worked a lot on my mindset. So I managed in that moment to just kind of, I looked at my broken pole when I stood up, dusted myself off. And I remember just thinking to myself, I laughed. I was like, you can see it. I've got the video on my socials. I kind of laugh. You can see me smirking. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this was never really meant to be easy, was it? So in that moment, I recovered and I carried on. But the point was now I'm in the middle of the race and I don't know how close I am to making it because I've lost 30 to 50 seconds in a race that really couldn't afford to lose any time. And I was going around the race. I still had the three quarters of the race left. So I remember just thinking to myself, Matt, leave nothing, or at least if you don't make it, at least you can say you didn't give up at the second kilometer and go, oh, well, probably haven't made it now. The last lap, I come round to the toughest part of the course, which is like this really steep uphill. It must be like, 30, 40%, really crazy steep, 30%. And everyone else just walks. They go out the ski tracks and they walk. And I'm glad that whoever they were on the race there walking, because I went past them and I remember thinking to myself, don't stop, don't walk. Like if you're faster than them, then So I just remember fighting every impulse inside my body to say stop. I was like, "There's no pacing now, push." And I just remember just being coughing up my lungs. Anyway, finished the race, and then I was smiling. I finished the race. I was happy, and you don't know if you've qualified yet because it's an interval start, meaning. They have to wait till the last person finishes. And people are still starting at this point, right? Because I went out pretty early. And we knew it roughly had to be under 4 or 5 minutes or something. And I'm right on the margin. My coach comes up to me and he goes, Matt, it's going to be like 5 seconds. But all I felt then in that moment was I was proud forever. I can hold my head high and say, no, I didn't give up. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my poles into the forest and give up. I gave it all. And then maybe 25 minutes later, the race is finished. They still have to delegate, and then there's an opportunity for anyone to make a protest for anything, or someone's skis were illegal, whatever. I'm there with Alan, the Mexican, who inspired me to do this, with his family and my family, the Saudi Arabian, Rakan, and then someone's plus one. I don't even know who she was. She just runs up and she goes, "You guys made it! You guys made it!" And then, she hands me her phone, right? And it's a printout. It's like a PDF. And so you're zooming in by your name and there's 100 names. You're trying to, and then it's a line from the left to the right that's 10 centimeters. So you're tracking along the line to see if the points add up to the time and the name. And then, I had to get under 300 points and I think I got 263 or something like that. So, comfortably under the margin. So it wasn't 5 seconds. It was actually almost a minute under still. But I'll tell you the one thing that still bothers me. The guy who inspired me to do this, the Mexican, I came 38th in that race and he came 37th by 5 seconds, meaning I was beating him by 45 seconds if I didn't have that crash, right? So no, I only joke, of course, but it's a funny joke between us because I was actually beating him in that race and he's the guy who inspired me. But the beautiful narrative is that, he gave me my first lesson. He was the being that I saw that inspired me to do this. And we qualified side by side. 37th and 38th in that race. And we're both going together now, you know?
That is so wholesome. Earlier you mentioned about community and obviously talking about Alan and how influential he's been. Because I read that is there a WhatsApp community or something for the small nations who don't come from a typical snow background?
Correct. Team Avalanche. Credit to Nick Lau, who's the brainchild of this, who is the typical ski nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Switzerland, and he began this journey 12 years ago or something, and he set up a WhatsApp group called Team Avalanche, which has just grown to today. I think we're 54 small nations, from Tanzania to South Africa, Mexico, to Trinidad and Tobago, to you name it, where we all just basically share resources, share which races we're going to. So it's just been a great community. I mean, that's the best thing I'll take from this, is the people that I've met along the way. It's just been really beautiful to be, because, we don't have the knowledge that all the other Nordic nations have, or access to the knowledge, right? And whilst the Norwegians, in my experience, to me specifically, have been really helpful and sharing resources and cheering for me, you need a community around you. And that is our community. So arguably we're the biggest, actually, ski nation of nations, you could say, which is very Olympic spirit, let's be honest.
As someone who loves the outdoors, it's so frustrating that getting to epic places with my gear often means relying on planes or cars, because greener public transport options are limited, disconnected, and definitely not designed with adventure in mind. Take bikes on trains, for example. It can be a total nightmare, as every operator has different rules, every country has different policies, spaces are limited, and UK train prices, need I say more. That's why the Protect Our Winter's UK Clean Miles campaign matters. They're calling for public transport that's affordable, reliable, well-connected, and built for adventure, so that we can reach the mountains in a greener, easier way. Transport is one of the biggest drivers of climate change, and we urgently need better options. Head to the link in the pod description now to sign the campaign. Yeah, looking ahead to the Olympics, how are you feeling?
If you asked me this in the middle of summer, or even the beginning of summer last year, I would have told you that if I could click my fingers and fast forward the 250 days of my life it was until the Olympics, I would do that. One thing was qualifying. And then the other thing is, okay, now you have a year until you go. You still have to maintain your training. You still have to maintain your motivation. So to be honest with you, it's been a whole different type of a struggle, actually, and opportunity. So if you asked me that in summer, I would have maybe given you that answer. But during the summer, I realized I also had a child, right? That's a different life stress. But what I realized was this is the last 100 days, or now 30 days. This is likely the last 30 days I will be training for an Olympics, right? So enjoy every day of that. Just focus on today. And then tomorrow, focus on tomorrow. And before you know it, the 30 days will melt away and I'll be there. Because 3 years is a long time to be focusing on anything. Let alone athletes have been trying to focus on this for 20 years, right? So, just being honest about how it feels. Because I've had other athletes like myself, the Saudi Arab athlete and others who've shared in that experience. Like, how's your motivation? Like, how are you pushing yourself through? What's your next goal? Because we often go from goal to goal. And I think I've been trying to not focus on another goal, because have you heard of the hedonic treadmill?
No, I haven't.
It's basically that, in life, we tend to go from goal to goal, right? And you'll achieve a goal, and then that you said would make you happy a year ago, or you said, if I achieve that, I'll be the happiest and I'll feel like the most successful. And then you achieve it and you immediately set the next one. And of course we need to keep striving and pushing ourselves, etc. I'm going to not sit on my laurels, but I'm definitely going to bask in being present with what I've achieved and the journey, and reflect on the journey that it has been.
Oh yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Can you tell us a bit about the balance of, becoming a professional athlete and going for that Olympic goal, but also being an entrepreneur and a dad?
So how I describe balance is balancing blocks. I'll explain. So I think it's very unrealistic. You can have it sometimes, but to have a daily, like day-to-day balance, right? Because people always ask me as an athlete, and bear in mind, I'm 35 now, right? I started at 32, right? So I'd had a career before. I realized this as well in entrepreneurship as well, like you work in sprints. Some people sprint all the time, and then that's when people get burnt out and all that kind of stuff. I call it time boxing. You time box a period. Like, we're going to test this for this amount of time, or until we have this much feedback, or this responses, or this much income, or not. In sports, it's exactly the same. People always ask me, what's your average training day? I was like, I don't have an average training day, because every block, I'm working on something different. And a block is 3 to 6 weeks. So right now, I've just finished, because yesterday was a rest day. I've just finished a 3-week block of volume, where I was focusing on less intense training but higher volume, more hours, lower intensity, right? So I'm training more, but it's costing me less in terms of absolute fatigue. But you get fatigue by training more, right? So now I will go into my last intensity block to spike my VO2 max before the Olympics. So the next 3 weeks for me, because we're a month away, is an intensity block. And one thing I will say is that people always ask me, the training, it must be so hard, the training, right? No, the training's the easy part. The true cost of doing what we do as professional athletes, trying to achieve Olympic qualifications and other things like that, isn't paid by us. It's not like the hardness of the training or whatever it is. It's paid by the people around us. And I think a lot more athletes, if they have people around them, be it families, partners, etc., this is why it bodes well to be a single athlete in your 20s, because you don't have to worry about it or think about anyone else, right? That kind of makes sense, right? But we need to communicate more with everyone around us. So I've become better at this by learning the hard way, but saying to my partner, hey, listen, I'm going into a volume block, which means I'm going to be away more training, communicating what I'm going to be going through. Because as she understands, my partner, for example, how I'm going to be a little bit more maybe grumpy, irritable, need more sleep, more rest, less flexible on my plans. And we are now in this together, right? Versus them, whoever it is, partner, friend, bearing the brunt of your worst side, which is, trust me, anyone after a long training session isn't their best when they're tired, hungry, whatever. So yeah, more communication in sport around the people who are supporting you in it, I think is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Matt, I thought we'd finish with a quick fire, if you're up for it.
I'm ready.
Favorite pre-race snack?
Red Bull.
Ooh. Favorite snow sport that's not on skis?
Snowball throwing? I don't know. I can't think of anything other than skis.
Your spirit animal and why?
Lion, because I have a lion's mane of hair when it's longer, not right now. I'll take it. And I'm South African, and we have that's one of our animals. So
I like it. Okay. So bit of a cliche, but your New Year's resolution?
Don't have one. Okay. Don't have one. New Year's resolution, don't believe in that stuff. I'm all for, just taking action in the moment on the things you want to take action in and holding yourself accountable to the best version of yourself, basically. So no New Year's resolution. But I do like when, for example, this journey I've been on for the last 3 years started the day after my birthday, right? So I like New Year's and Christmases and birthdays because they give you an opportunity for reflection. And it's, I think most of us want to be reflective people, but we need to be reminded to be reflected. And the reality is those are good times of year to remind you to do it, as opposed to just, I'm going to set an intention at the New Year's to be the best me. It's more just like, hey, pause for a second. Think, am I happy with the way I'm conducting myself with others? Am I happy with the way I'm conducting myself with myself? And then moving on from that.
That's some great wisdom, which leads me to best piece of advice you've ever been.
You are more than your results. Is it okay that I gave myself that advice?
I think it's
But it's
brilliant.
True. Honestly, no, you are more than your results. I mean, and I've proven that in what I've done in the sport and who I am as an athlete, right? And I think more athletes need to hear that, because whether you are 12, 14, 16, 25, 32, and you started like me, realizing that no one is good until they're good, right? And you're going to crash and you're going to fall and you're going to fail. And if you don't place your self-worth on your results, you also realize that you have more to offer than just results.
I think that's some really lovely advice. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the Passion Stories podcast. You've been a brilliant guest and we can't wait to see you at the Olympics.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Emma. Cheers.
Just so inspiring. I'm not going to lie. I'm loving that he decided on his Olympic dream at 32 and 35 he is living it. That is just so inspiring, because it means I can do it. But it just doesn't it make you feel that so much is possible in life. And I think Matt's also comments on the community and how important that has been, and that incredible WhatsApp group that was set up just shows the power of community. And for me, that's always been particularly relevant in sport. And it's really wholesome, I think, having all these people to stay and opening up your home if you can, to be like, yes, let's get people involved, because coming from a non-snow sport nation must be really difficult in many aspects. So it is awesome that exists. And, on the other side of it, you've also got the his determination it's epic. It's a bit overwhelming. I mean, I don't know if like having all those blocks and time blocks and incredibly organized, and you can just tell that he is so passionate about what he does, and he is incredibly determined, and that's where a lot of his success, I guess, comes from, is because he sounds very organized, and it's incredibly impressive. I feel very inspired. I feel like I'm also gonna organize as my word of the year. That would be very helpful. You know what also struck me was that right at the beginning he said basically that cross-country skiing isn't that cool, and I for one have never felt that. I always thought it looked so wholesome and peaceful, and you're just exploring the whole time. And if you haven't guessed, I really would like to try it. Maybe I'll add that to my bucket list. Oh yeah. But thank you, Matt. That was so inspiring. I'm so excited to see how he gets on at the Winter Olympics, and you know, he's going to have a book maybe out sort of towards the end of the year. So keep your eyes peeled and go follow him on Instagram and check out his social media, because he shares his journey, and it's funny, it's wholesome, it's insightful, and you won't regret it. I've linked his Instagram handle in the description, so go check it out now. And make sure you also check out the Protect Our Winters UK Clean Miles campaign, which is just so incredibly important. We need affordable public transport to get to the slopes and to get to the mountains, and we also need some serious change to help with the impact of climate change. And as always, make sure you like, follow, share, subscribe to the Passion Stories podcast to be in the know when the next brilliant winter sports guest drops. And go and check out all of the amazing other episodes, because there is a guest for everyone. Just trust me and go check them out. They are so inspiring, and I'm so excited to bring you more. I've been Emma Cole. Thank you for listening. Thanks to Tune Tank to the tunes.